welcome to this revision video on Unit 1 External Exam Revision. So we've got each of the sections here, skeletal, muscular, respiratory, cardiovascular, energy, and then the 8 markers at the end. So these, and there's the timestamps there as well. So if you want only a certain section, then you can do that. So skeletal. The skeletal's lots of different bones, and there's two sections that these bones are split into. So you've got the axial skeleton, which is seen in red on the picture there, and that's just consisting of the cranium, the sternum, the ribs and the vertebrae. That's like the main core of the body, and then the appendicular just adds on to those sections. 20 major bones that you should know. They're all here. These ones it's just about practice, looking at diagrams, drawing diagrams out. As you can see, they're all labelled there. And lots of different positions of the skeleton that you also need to know. You've got the anterior, posterior, medial, lateral, proximal, distal, superior and inferior. Again, diagrams on the right there to show you. There's different types of bones. There's actually 5, not 4. They include long, short, flat, irregular and sesamoid. They've also got lots of functions, and the functions of these bones could include a support, protection, attachment, source of blood cell production, store of minerals, leverage, weight bearing, and reducing friction. Each of them have a different role, and you can see them there. Pause the video if you need to look into that in more detail. So long bones, they're found in the limbs, and they have a shaft, as you can see in the picture, where you've got the dialysis, and then you've got the epiphyse as well on the ends. So, examples of long bones are seen in the diagram in red: humerus, radius, ulna, femur, tibia, fibula, metatarsals, metacarpals and phalanges. And their main functions are movement, support, red blood cell production, and those are the names. Short bones, they're small, they're light and they're strong. They're also cubed, so you can see in the picture they're just at that point on your wrist, and they're the carpals in the wrist and the tarsals in the ankle. Okay, their function is fine or small movement, shock absorption and weight bearing. Flat bones, so they've got a large surface area and they're slightly curved as well. They're just the formation of bones sticking together, creating the structure. It's seen in the scapula, sternum and cranium. Function of attachment to muscles, and they protect vital organs like the brain, which is the cranium's role. Irregular bones, they're complex shapes, so it's basically just the vertebrae. That's all you need to know in the spinal column. They're again for protection and movement. Sesamoid bones, they're usually found in the tendon, and the best example is the patella, really. It's found in the knee joint. The function is protection and reduction of friction across this joint. The vertebrae, so you need to know the different sections of the vertebrae. There's 33 irregular bones split into 5 sections: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral or sacrum, they both work, and coccyx. And as you can see, the different sections have different numbers of bones: 7, 12, 5, 5, 4. It's got 5 main functions: obviously protecting the spinal cord, but it also supports the rib cage, supports body weight, offers attachment for muscles in the back especially, and reduces shock by distributing the impact. 2 postural deviations: kyphosis and scoliosis. Kyphosis is hunchback, scoliosis is an S shape, normal curve. 3 different types of joints. You've got fixed joint, slightly movable joints, and synovial. Fixed are immovable, so they don't move. An example is the cranium. Slightly movable, example is the vertebrae. And then synovial, that's the most of the bones, and they're all freely movable joints. So yeah, these are the most joints out, and yeah, they just support movements and have lots of bones joining to form a joint. Different types you've got. Right, this is the structure of the synovial joint. So you've got the ligaments, which can be seen in the picture. They attach bone to bone. Tendons attach muscle to bone. Synovial fluid adds that lubrication in the joint, preventing friction, same as cartilage. The joint capsule is tough tissue, which encloses the joint, providing support, and the bursae is a sac of fluid, which also reduces friction. So a lot of this is reducing friction at the joint. Different types. Here's the types. So you've got the hinge, ball and socket, condyloid, gliding, pivot, and saddle, all seen there. Yeah, they're all visualised there, and you can see them. The hinge joint, it helps movement in one direction. So that's the elbow, knees, and ankles. Those are examples. Ball and socket. It allows movement in all directions, so that can be seen in the hips and shoulders. Condyloid, they're found in the wrist, and they allow movement forwards, backwards, and side to side. Gliding, they're found in the bone's meat, flat surfaces, allow moving in any direction. Carpals and tarsals are these examples. Saddle joints, literally just found in the base of the thumb, and they allow movement in all directions. So with those joints, it's really important that you know them, you know examples of these joints and where they can be found. So there are different movements found at synovial joints. We've got them all listed there. Won't go through them as we go through them in the next slide. So flexion reduces the angle occurring at the knee. Extension extends that angle. Dorsiflexion brings the toes up. Plantar flexion points toes away. Lateral flexion is sideways bending. Horizontal flexion is moving of a limb in front of the body. Horizontal extension is moving away from the body. Hyperextension is basically a massive movement beyond the usual anatomical position. Abduction is movement away from the midline. Adduction is movement towards the midline. So those are you need to know. Ab, away, add, towards. Horizontal is just bringing a limb across the body and moving the limb away from the body. Circumduction is circular movements in a condyloid, a conical action. Alright, and rotation is again circular movement, but it's not in that conical action, and that's the difference between them both. Bone growth. So bones grow through epiphysis plates, allowing a long bone to extend. Once this long bone extends, the ends fuse with the shaft, which is the dialysis. The bones are able to grow with calcium, and it's brought by osteoblasts. And when their bones are finished growing, that's the osteoclasts, which remove this excess calcium. Osteoblast activity increases when we're exercising. So there are responses you need to know of the skeletal system. Increase in synovial fluid, so that's more lubrication. Decrease in viscosity of the synovial fluid, so it allows more range of movement at the joints. Simulated increase of mineral uptake helps the bones grow. And then the adaptations increase bone strength, so we can exercise for longer because our bones are stronger basically. Increase ligament strength. The ligaments are attaching bone to bone, so they can stretch more and make them more pliable. And increased thickness of articular cartilage prevents rubbing. Additional factors, 3 things you need to know. Arthritis is caused by the inflammation within a synovial joint, and that causes the bones to rub basically and causes pain. Osteoporosis, that's a weakening down of the bones due to a lack of calcium or vitamin D, and this creates the brittle bones disease. And age, excessive weight gaining can damage the epithelial plates, which can stunt bone growth, so that's why young children should be taking part in massively weight-bearing exercises. Muscular. 3 types of muscles. Cardiac, which move under involuntary control. They pump blood all around in the heart through contractions, and they're found in the heart obviously. Skeletal, that's conscious control. They're movements with the skeleton basically, and they're attached to the bones of the skeleton system. And smooth, that's also conscious control, and they're in the digestive system and help with the digestive process. They can also be found in the circulatory system a bit as well. But yeah, it's important to know the difference between these and know how they all work. 3 types of muscle fibers. Slow twitch, which is an aerobic respiration, which doesn't fatigue quickly, but they're slow, so it's long distance running, right? Type 2A, fast twitch, they're less reliant on oxygen, but they fatigue quicker than type 1, so this is more like 400 meter runs. And then type 2X, fast twitch, this is the greatest force, but they fatigue really quickly, and it's for anaerobic respiration exercises, example sprinting. So you need to know the different types of muscle fibers and their sporting examples. The all or none law, very simple. It's just the idea that the fibers in the muscle will either all contract or none of them will contract at all. 20 different muscles you need to know, deltoids all the way through to the latissimus dorsi. Again, they're shown in these pictures, you just need to know them, you need to know where they are. Flashcards can help with this, diagrams can help with this. Stationary end of the muscles, that's the origin. The movable end is the insertion. So, what are the roles, what are the main movements found at these muscles? Well, deltoids, they produce abduction at the shoulder. Biceps produce flexion at the elbow. Triceps produce extension at the elbow. Pectorals produce horizontal adduction at the shoulder. Wrist flexors flex the hand at the wrist. Wrist extenders extend the hand at the wrist. Wrist supinators rotate the forearm. Wrist pronators rotate the forearm as well, so they both kind of have that role of rotating the forearm. Abdominals flex and rotate the lumbar vertebrae. Obliques produce lateral flexion of the waist. Quadriceps extend at the knee. Hamstrings flex at the knee. Hip flexors flex at the hip. Gluteals extend at the hip. Tibialis anterior produce dorsiflexion. Gastrocnemius produces plantarflexion. They're both at the ankles. Soleus helps produce plantarflexion at the ankle. Rectus spinae extends the spine. Trapezius elevates and depresses the scapula, and latissimus dorsi produces adduction at the shoulder. Muscles, they can only pull on bones. They work in pairs. Okay. Examples of these are the biceps and the triceps, and they're antagonist pairs. So, when a muscle contracts, it shortens. That is the agonist, alright? But when a muscle relaxes, that's an antagonist, okay? So that's the difference. So the muscle shortening is the agonist, the muscle relaxing is the antagonist. Examples of some pairs, we've also already said the bicep and tricep. So that's at the elbow. Yeah, that can be seen at the elbow. You've got the knee as well, has quadriceps and hamstrings. At the ankle, you've got tibialis anterior and gastrocnemius. Hip, gluteals and hip flexors, and shoulder, deltoid and latissimus dorsi. So, synergists are muscles that enable us to work. Alright? So they help the muscles work with the agonist to control and direct movements. Fixators stop any unwanted movement. So synergists allow that movement, fixators stop that unwanted movement. They do that through stabilizing a joint. Example of this could be the soleus being a synergist for the gastrocnemius during plantarflexion. right? And deltoids and pectorals, examples of fixators during the bicep curl. There are also three types of contraction. Concentric, so that's when the muscle contracts and shortens, examples upward phase of a squat. Eccentric, it's when a muscle contracts. And the isometric is no movement, alright, so the muscles doesn't lengthen or shorten. Example here is a plank. Responses. So, there are 6 responses you need to know. Increased blood supply. While exercising, you require more oxygen and glucose, supporting the muscles. Muscle temp is when your muscles are working, they produce energy, and that's in the form of heat. Muscle pliability, basically because you're warming your muscles, it makes them more pliable and flexible. You're less likely to suffer strains. Lactate increases, so lactate's going to build up in your muscles, which can cause pain and stiffness. Micro tears, resistance training causes stress on your muscles, and it responds by repairing these and making them larger through the micro tears. And DOMS, delayed onset of muscle soreness, pain, which is felt between 24 hours and 48 hours after taking part in strenuous exercise. Adaptions. So you've got some key adaptions here. Muscular hypertrophy. They increase, basically muscles increasing in size, helping them to contract with greater force. Tendon strength. Tendons increasing in strength and flexibility, working for longer this time. These muscles can now work for longer. Increased number and size of mitochondria. That's occurring due to muscle hypertrophy. And there's more room, basically, and larger mitochondria in these muscles, which help to improve that aerobic performance. Increased myoglobin stores helps to provide the body with more energy as a result, as more myoglobin reaches the mitochondria and helps with that energy systems. Increased storage of glycogen. More glycogen is stored, helping to provide more energy. Yeah, that glycogen is broken down for the energy. Increased storage of fats. When we're doing long durations of aerobic exercise, we can use fats as energy, so the body adapts to have more stores of this to then be used. And tolerance of lactate, it becomes more effective at removing and prolonging lactate acid through increased exercise. Age. As we get older, we lose muscle mass, right? So sedentary lifestyles can accelerate this loss of muscle mass. So basically, by getting older, we're losing this muscle mass. So that's where we lose all the kind of built up muscle that we have. But if we have had a sedentary lifestyle, then that muscle mass is going to be even further reduced at certain ages, just because we haven't been building up muscle to accommodate. Cramp. When there's a sudden strong contraction of muscle, this is an involuntary contraction causing pain, and in order to reduce this kind of contraction, we need to stay hydrated and stretch before any exercise. Respiratory. So there's about 11 key areas you need to know in the respiratory system, in its structure itself. Nasal cavity, the mouth, larynx and epiglottis. Lungs, you've got the bronchi, you've got left and right. Diaphragm, pharynx, trachea, bronchioles and alveoli. They're all linked, they're numbered. So, what are these functions? Well, the nasal cavity, that allows air to pass through the nostrils. The hair in the nostrils filters out different particles. The air is moistened and warmed here. The mouth breathes out that carbon dioxide, can also bring in some air as well, but mainly it's the nasal cavity. The larynx is the voice box, and it connects the pharynx and the trachea. It's rigid muscle and cartilage, helping stop any collapsion. Epiglottis is a small flap of cartilage which shuts the top of the trachea when we're eating, so we don't basically engulf food and drink into our lungs instead of going to our stomach. Lungs are obviously the main part of the respiratory system. Bronchi carry air to the lungs and then divide it into the separate lobar bronchi on the right and the left. There's 3 on the right, 2 on the left. Basically, that's how those work. The diaphragm is a flat muscle beneath the lungs, and this draws in oxygen, helps with the drawing in of oxygen and then breathing out of carbon dioxide. So the diaphragm, when we inspire, it contracts and pulls flat. When we expire, it relaxes and rises into a dome shape. More on that kind of later. The pharynx is the throat, and that basically connects the nasal cavity to the larynx, and I'm not going to attempt. Everyone knows what that is, but I'm not going to attempt that one. Passing food and air. It's the windpipe, the trachea. So the windpipe, it's basically rings of cartilage, and it stops it collapsing after starting at the lower respiratory tract. Bronchioles, they're smaller airways, and they extend from bronchi to the alveoli. Alright, so they're just smaller parts found in the lungs. And then the alveoli, they're found at the end of each bronchiole, and they're a mass of air sacs, and they transfer oxygen and remove carbon dioxide through the process of gaseous exchange. So, when we inspire by breathing in, our diaphragm contracts and pulls flat, and then our external intercostal muscles cause the ribs to move up and outwards. When we expire though, breathing out, the diaphragm relaxes, creating this dome shape, and our internal intercostal muscles move down and inwards. Gases have to go from high to low concentration or high to low pressure. So when we inspire, the concentration of our air outside is higher than in our lungs. Alright, so this means the atmosphere has a higher concentration, lungs lower concentration, so the air goes from the atmosphere straight into the lungs. It's the opposite when we expire though, so there is a higher concentration in our lungs than outside our body, causing the air to leave our lungs because the atmosphere has a lower concentration, lungs high to lower number. Internal intercostal muscles, they're situated in the rib cage, and they basically cause a decrease in the volume of chest cavity, forcing air out when we breathe out. External, they're in the rib cage again, and they pull the ribs upwards and outwards, increasing the volume of chest cavity. Alright? Gaseous exchange, this is movement of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So, it occurs through oxygen coming into the blood because of diffusion between the air in the alveoli and the blood in the capillaries, right, which surround the alveoli. Then the oxygen diffuses into the blood through the film walls of the capillaries, right, and this oxygen then moves from where it's highly concentrated in the alveoli to where it's lowly concentrated in the blood. So that's how it's moving across, because alveoli, high concentration, blood, low concentration, so it moves through those processes, through the alveoli to the capillaries and then into the blood. Carbon dioxide does the opposite basically. It moves from the blood, which is highly concentrated, into the alveoli. Alright? And then it's breathed out obviously as carbon dioxide. Lung volumes, there are about 7 of these that you need to know. Alright, the total lung capacity is when maximum volume of air, it's the maximum volume that your lungs can hold, and it's what is left following a massive inhalation. Alright, so when you fully breathe in, that's the maximum amount. The tidal volume is the volume of air breathed in or out during a normal breath. Okay. The expiratory reserve volume is the amount of air available after a massive exhale. Okay, following a normal exhalation. So it's the amount of air which we can breathe out following that normal exhalation, whereas the inspiratory reserve volume is the amount of space available to fill following a normal inhalation. so they're opposites, and they can be seen in the diagram over there. Residual volume is the volume of air that's always left in the lungs, even after maximum exhalation. Vital capacity is the maximum amount of air that can be breathed out after breathing in as much as possible. Anticipatory rise is the breathing rate increases when your body is getting prepared or knows that exercise is about to endure. So your body reacts, they know exercise is happening, so they increase that breathing rate. Two controls of breathing: the chemical way, which is changing levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood, cause sensors to respond to these changes. They're called chemoreceptors. These chemoreceptors are found in the carotid artery and the aortic arch, and they just send signals to the medulla oblongata, which then changes and causes an increase in breathing rate. Again, remember, high to low concentration, so you've got that high concentration of carbon dioxide to that low concentration of oxygen, and this causes the body to produce more work to get that oxygen in the body. Alright? It's done by the diaphragm and intercostals again. Then the neural control. So there's two areas. There's the DRG, which is the dorsal respiratory group, and the VRG, so the ventral respiratory group. DRG is responsible for the quiet breathing, right? VRG is that forced breathing. They're both responsible for the rhythmic and continuous breathing experienced. DRG uses diaphragm, the VRG uses the extra respiratory muscles. Responses. Got two here. Increased breathing rates, so basically because we're exercising we need more oxygen to come in, so our breathing rate increases. Anticipatory rise also can be seen to increase the breathing rate through adrenaline. Increased tidal volume, that's the tidal volume is the volume of air breathed in and out per breath, so because our breathing rate's increasing, so does our tidal volume. Adaptations: increase vital capacity, long-term physical training, make our muscles more efficient to supply this oxygen, leads to the vital capacity to increase. Increased strength of respiratory muscles, the diaphragm and intercostal muscles will get stronger as we exercise, right? And then the increase in oxygen and carbon dioxide diffusion rate. Regular training causes oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse quickly. In result, it causes diffusion rate to increase, meaning that we can train for longer. Additional factors: asthma. This is a band of muscles surrounding the airway contract and tighten. This causes asthma, right? Coughing, wheezing, shortness of breath, and this can have a negative effect on sport performance, although regular exercise can strengthen these, and also inhalers can help with this band of tissue, relaxing it a bit more. Altitude training. It basically creates a tough environment to train in. Someone with low air pressure and less oxygen. The effects of this, there's got two types. There's short term and long term. Short term, reduced oxygen supply, less oxygen is combining with hemoglobin, increased breathing rate, and fatigue also sets in sooner. Long term, it can help increase our red blood cells, helping provide greater energy, oxygen basically, helping us to then produce that energy. Performers can work at higher intensities without fatigue, and it improves recovery time. Although a negative effect of altitude training is some can experience altitude sickness. Cardiovascular. 3 layers of the heart. You've got the epicardium, the myocardium, and the endocardium. Outer layer is the epicardium. The myocardium is basically the strong middle layer. It's got most of the heart walls in it, and then the endocardium is the inner layer. So, heart chambers. You've got the right atrium. Supplies deoxygenated blood at lower pressures, and that moves the blood to the right ventricle. The right ventricle supplies deoxygenated blood at low pressures and moves it to the blood, which goes to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. The left atrium, it supplies oxygenated blood at high pressure and moves this blood down to the left ventricle, and the left ventricle, this basically supplies the oxygenated blood at high pressure to blood in the body, to the body basically, through the aorta. Heart structures. You've got lots of different heart structures there. These ones again you need to know what they are. You can name them in the exam, number them, etc. So, numbers 3 and 10, they're the atriums, they're the upper chambers of the heart. They receive blood, return it then to your heart. It's coming from the body or the lungs, this blood, and the right receives deoxygenated from the vena cava, the left receives oxygenated from the pulmonary veins. Ventricles, they're the pumping chambers, they're thicker walls than the atria, and they pump the blood at higher pressures against force of gravity. And basically, the left ventricle is more muscular, the right ventricle pumps to the lungs, whereas the left ventricle pumps to the body. Tricuspid valve, it's one of the 4 valves, and it's situated below the right atrium and right ventricle, and it prevents the backflow of blood. Bicuspid valve, similar thing, but it's at the left side, the left atrium and the left ventricle. Aortic semilunar valve, again very similar. It's situated between the left ventricle and aorta, and this prevents backflow. And the pulmonary semilunar valve, it's situated between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, again preventing backflow. Blood vessels. So blood's composed of some key things: plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. But there's also blood vessels, alright? So we've got the arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. So the arteries carry blood away from the body, from the heart, carrying it to the body. They carry oxygenated blood, and they have muscle walls that contract to maintain the blood pressure. Arterioles link the arteries with capillaries. Again, they have thick muscular walls to deal with the high pressure, and they increase blood flow. Capillaries, they're 1 cell thick, and they allow the exchange of gases, nutrients, and waste between the blood and surrounding tissue. Venules collect the deoxygenated blood and take it from the capillaries and transport it to the veins, and the veins return the deoxygenated blood to the heart. Functions. So there's some key functions of the blood. We've got delivering oxygen and nutrients, so supplying that oxygen to the muscles to work, removing waste products, or removing lactic acid and carbon dioxide. Thermoregulation, so it ensures we don't overheat. So vasodilation is basically having more blood flowing towards the skin, causing a decrease in the body temperature, as we're having the heat lost as radiation, whereas vasoconstriction is a decrease in the blood vessels, so it increases resistance to heat is trapped, okay, causing the body temperature to increase. Fighting infection, white blood cells produce antibodies, and they destroy the pathogens basically, and they also send out antitoxins which destroy these pathogens. And clotting blood is fibrin, which is used when one of the blood vessels are damaged, and they can help to bind the platelets together, forming a clot. Alright. Cardiac cycle. So the process in which this basically gets our heart moving, right? So the SA node, seen on the right, sets the rate of the rhythm of the heartbeat and sends an impulse causing the atriums to contract, forcing blood into the ventricles. The impulse then travels to the AV node, and that goes into the ventricles, and this impulse then flows through fibres, which are known as the bundle of His, in the septum, and this then moves from these bundle of hairs to the Purkinje fibres, causing the ventricles to contract, forcing blood out of the heart. The sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems can send messages to the SA nodes, increasing heart rate during exercise. Anticipatory rise in heart rate is one of the responses. It increases in heart rate prior to exercise is caused by adrenaline. Increased heart rate is so the heart rate's increased to ensure enough oxygen is basically getting to the muscles. Increased cardiac output, that's heart rate times stroke volume, and that occurs because the volume of blood pumped out the left ventricle per minute is getting increased, right? And this is caused by the exercise increasing this cardiac output. Increased blood pressure, the systolic blood pressure increases, so our heart is now working harder for longer, supplying more blood to the working muscles. The diastolic pressure stays the same, and the redirection of blood flow, blood's pumped round the essential areas during exercise. Adaptations. Cardiac hypertrophy, that's basically the muscle increasing in size. Resting and exercising stroke volume. Basically, due to cardiac hypertrophy, the muscles are stronger, so they can pump more blood around to the body, increasing stroke volume. Decrease in resting heart rate. Having the increased stroke volume means that the heart doesn't need to beat as often, so less cardiac output is needed. Reduction in resting blood pressure. Cardiac hypertrophy causes an increase in the plasma volume, reducing our blood pressure. Decrease in heart rate recovery time. So due to an increase in stroke volume, this helps return the heart rate to the resting level sooner. So we don't need these, and then our body doesn't need these high heart rate levels. Capillarization of skeletal muscle and alveoli. The capillaries density are increased, so greater volumes of blood can flow through the body, ensuring good supplies of oxygen and nutrients and removing carbon dioxide. Increased blood volume, it helps enable the delivery of more oxygen to working muscles, regulating the body temperature, delaying the onset of fatigue, and enabling activity at a high intensity for longer. Additional factors, so we've got a couple here. The first one is sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, SADS, and this is caused when death is caused by cardiac arrest, and it's a disturbance in the heart rhythm, and it's literally genetic, alright? High in blood pressure, basically high blood pressure is hypertension, low blood pressure is hypotension, alright? Sudden increases in the demand for blood can cause people who have high blood pressure to really suffer, right? This is dangerous. Those with low blood pressure are restricting the blood reaching their vital organs and muscles. Hyperthermia is when we've got an increase in body temperature, so when we're really hot, right, and we need breathable clothing. Hypothermia is when we're too cold, right, body's below 35 degrees, and we need adequate clothing. Energy. There are some key points on energy that we need to know. So the ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's a high energy bond, and it's one molecule of adenosine and 3 phosphates seen on the right. And ATP is that stored energy which we break down. So, breakdown of ATP. ATPase comes along and breaks one of these bonds, pushing one of the phosphates to the side, producing energy and leaving an ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. Then if we want to resynthesize this ATP, this phosphate comes back and combines through energy, creating an ATP. 3 different systems: ATP-PC, anaerobic, glycolic system, and aerobic system. So the ATP is an anaerobic performance type of reaction. It's occurs in the cytoplasm, it's initiated by high levels of ADP in the body, and the fuel is phosphocreatine. So phosphocreatine is broken down by creatine kinase to produce phosphate and 1 creatine plus energy. Alright? Then this energy combines with ATP and the spare phosphate to produce ATP. Right? This is used for very high intensity. Right? The duration is 8 to 10 seconds. But it is not great because there's low stores of phosphocreatine, and the full recovery takes 2 to 3 seconds. Examples of activities are 100-meter long jump and shot put. Team games could be like a penalty or rugby tackle, right? Lactic acid, anaerobic again, in the sarcoplasm again, indicated this time by low levels of phosphocreatine, and glycogen or glucose is used. So glucose broken down by glycolic enzymes to produce energy for 2 ATP. So the phosphocreatine kinase, PFK, is used to do this. So there's 2 molecules of pyruvic acid which are produced, but there's no oxygen here to use to then react with the lactate dehydrogenase, which produces 2 molecules of lactic acid as a result. Alright, so lactic acid produced because there's no oxygen. This system, bad obviously because it produces lactic acid, but the byproduct, it's good for individual activities like 400 meter running, 100 meter swimming. Team activity, you've got sprinting down the road. Aerobic system, so this is obviously an aerobic reaction. It occurs in the sarcoplasm for the aerobic glycolysis system, but then it occurs in the mitochondria for the Krebs and the electron transport system. Initiated by oxygen, and basically what happens is the aerobic glycolysis system breaks down, creating 2 ATP. The Krebs cycle breaks down what is left, the acetyl coenzyme A, which is left after the aerobic cycle, and that basically is then broken down to create 2 ATP and hydrogen. That hydrogen then goes on to the 3rd stage and produces that 34 ATP. Right? Carbon dioxide and water are byproducts, and these are used for marathon runners or lasting the whole game. You can go into more detail for this one. I've just basically broadened the ideas. Adaptations. There are 5 adaptations that you need to know about this. Right, you've got increased creatine, meaning that if there are more stores of phosphocreatine, then the ATP system can work more effectively, at more quicker rate all the time. Improved aerobic system is basically when the system better suited to resynthesize ATP aerobically, because it is using all this ATP. The system is more effective, so it's better. Increased tolerance to lactic acid is when performers build up their muscle tolerance to lactic acid and reduce it, and that basically causes less fatigue to occur because they're more adaptive. And then we've got increased use of fats as energy stores. So fats are used when glycogen gets depleted around 90 minutes, and trained athletes basically can use this fat stores, producing their energy lasting longer. And the final one, mitochondria increase. Because there's more mitochondria, we can increase the supply of ATP. Enzymes can be increased in the muscles, allowing us to store more glycogen and perform at longer intensities for longer. Energy continuum. It's the idea that one system's used and until it's exhausted or finished, and then the next system takes over. Yeah, so it's that idea of one after the other. Additional factors. Diabetes. This is the body not being able to regulate glucose in the blood. Sorry. Type 1 occurs when the body cannot produce enough, which requires injection to the body. Alright, so that when there's not enough insulin, type 1, it basically needs these injections. Type 2 is when the body again can't produce, or it's not functioning properly. Right, and again injections are needed. Hypoglycemic attack, when there's low levels of glucose in the body, has no energy. This can be hunger, trembling, shaking. This occurs if you're diabetic, alright? And children's lack of lactate system, children's bodies aren't developed enough to remove this lactate produced, so they shouldn't be taking part in anaerobic exercise because they can't remove it. 8 markers. Quick thing on this. Basically, it's where you combine two parts, so muscular and all the other systems, cardiovascular and respiratory, or energy and cardiovascular. You make connections between either the responses or the adaptations, right, and you need to have relevant links and relevant knowledge. Here's all the adaptations and responses again, if you need to note them down. And that's it. Thank you for watching. Hopefully all the content that's covered it's just a broad understanding of it all. It's probably really helpful if you do some past papers, and pop in a comment if you have any suggestions for what I should do next. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.